Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the wonderful youngster Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. What's shaking today, my friend?
Not too much. Mondays, I've got off my little stock job, so I was chilling at home, just writing about Wisconsin high school sports this morning. And, yeah, it's been a chill day for me overall. Thinking about different Big Ten things, and obviously working one of my other jobs, writing about the Big Ten. It's an interesting time now that basketball's done and football, it's spring season. So there's stuff to talk about there, but realistically we're waiting till like August 30th, 31st for some of these teams to actually play their first game, real game. So it's that time of the year, I guess, in the Big Ten where it's like if you're not a huge football or basketball guy, you're just kind of waiting. And some people care about baseball, softball, hockey, wrestling, which we didn't even mention wrestling when it took place. But in any case, this is the time where it's like, okay, maybe you start looking at big picture stuff. To go through every single baseball week and games in baseball season or softball season or whatever, track. We're talking to literally thousands of people every single week on the show. We know that. We see the statistics. So we have to think as podcasters, show hosts, what to talk about. And so this week we're going over a couple different things, but I'll finally let you talk. Troy, how have you been?
Doing great. I mean, we're very busy, which is great. I mean, we enjoy being busy, but like you said, it's kind of like all the excitement's out of the air now for Big Ten, like for me to get worked up. But I think there's a topic today that's going to get me worked up a little bit. Yeah. So some of our episodes moving forward might include like Andy Capp's cheddar fries, burning cars, just different things going on in life because there are some sports, but we're not going to sit here and go through every baseball game, every softball game, every track meet. To be honest, I wouldn't listen if I was one of our fans. So we'll recap. We'll go over who's at top of the division, who's in first, if any big news is coming out of those sports, and there will be. And then eventually, maybe we'll get lucky and a couple of the Big Ten teams will be in the, World Series, College World Series from the Big Ten, like they were in the Frozen Four, which we're going to talk about today. That would be great. Maybe some women's softball teams will advance. I mean, that's what we're waiting for. But really, the next really get the old man worked up shows are probably not going to be till August after today. But we do have two good topics today. We got the Frozen Four. 3 Big Ten teams, Kevin, made the Frozen Four. You would have thought their odds are pretty good to bring the title back home to the Big Ten, but nada. 0 for 3 in the Frozen Four. But, hey, no other conference can say they got 3 to the Frozen Four. That's an accomplishment in itself. Big Ten hockey is awesome, very competitive. And then, like you said, spring practice. We're going to talk about it. We're going to bring up a topic. If spring practice, to the listeners, to the fans, you're going to ask me if I care about spring practice. I'll give you my 2 thoughts on that. But it'll be a good show. We'll go as quickly as we can. I know some of the loyal listeners probably used to some long-winded answers. Today we're just going to zoom. We're going to do it that way. But, when we look at it, Kevin, you got the Frozen Four. You got the Big Ten, like I said, Big Ten hockey. Growing up in Wisconsin used to dominate Big Ten hockey. I mean, they were the team. Other teams have caught up. In the Big Ten, Kevin, and this year, I mean, it just shows. 3 teams in the Frozen Four. I'll let you take it over, and then we'll talk about the Frozen Four.
Yeah. So, like you said, Frozen Four, 3 teams from the Big Ten, and yet no Big Ten team wins it. And the only team that wasn't from the Big Ten was Minnesota Duluth. Minnesota Duluth defeated Notre Dame in the championship game, and some of you people are out there saying, what do you mean? They beat Notre Dame, 3 Big Ten teams. Notre Dame hockey is in the Big Ten, and yes, they are. I wrote a couple articles regarding Notre Dame, like I said, for my other job that I do with Big Ten writing. And I had to look up, when did Notre Dame hockey become affiliated with the Big Ten? And it was literally this year. This was their first year. It was announced a year ago, or I guess 2 years ago. Technically, I forget sometimes that we're in 2018, which is stupid because it's April. But yes, 2 years ago it was announced that this season would be the first season that Notre Dame would compete in the Big Ten for men's ice hockey. And so Notre Dame was there, made the title game. The other two teams were Ohio State and Michigan. Of course, Ohio State didn't play Michigan in the semifinal. That would have been too cool to actually happen, kind of like Duke, North Carolina in the NCAA tournament for men's basketball. It just never happens. For whatever reason, it's weird to me as a Duke fan. But Minnesota Duluth beats Ohio State. Notre Dame beats Michigan in the semifinals, and then Minnesota Duluth beats Notre Dame 2-1 in the title game. So like you said, Troy, no true love, I guess, for the Big Ten in terms of hardware. But like you said, no conference can say they got 3 in. No conference can say they got 2 in. And only one conference can say they got any in. But that's the latest in hockey. That championship game took place, when was that? The Frozen Four started, that was April 7th. Frozen Four semifinals took place April 5th, so April 7th this past Saturday. We're recording this April 9th on a Monday. For those listening, just FYI. So, April 7th, Minnesota Duluth beats Notre Dame. I don't have much on it other than, like you said, Troy, Big Ten hockey, it's legit. And I guess the one thing I will say is that we talked about baseball. This is that stretch of the year where football, basketball, not exactly 100% prominent right now in terms of what's going on. Not that there's nothing going on, but other sports are in their regular, season, if not postseason soon. So we've done last year on this show, at this time, we did multiple baseball shows, and we kind of somewhat covered over the Big Ten baseball tournament for basically an entire show, and then, the NCAA tournament. I know the Big Ten got at least one team. I think it was a couple. Might have just been one a year ago. But so we talk about baseball, Notre Dame being in hockey here. It's just we're going to talk about Notre Dame hockey, Notre Dame as a school and the Big Ten a little later on. But football season, there is spring football. And that's taking place. But the one thing I wanted to say about hockey, too, hockey, baseball, we talk about a little of these sports, and we talked about baseball last year before we get moving on to spring football and football talk for the rest of the show. It's going to be a shorter show than usual. At least we're saying that. Troy and I are for right now.
We'll see where the clock is when we're done, my friend.
Yep. But we talked about last year Big Ten baseball and how it's like, okay, you get, I think it was one team. I think it was one team in the postseason. In Big Ten baseball as a whole, historically, there's been basically, I think we did the research a year ago, that I think there was one Big Ten team ever, it was something ridiculous, to ever even make like the final 4 teams, or the College World Series for baseball. That's like, why is that? We talked about that, talked about the weather, talked about other conferences caring more about baseball than the Big Ten does, just talked about a lot of bigger picture stuff. And so for hockey, I think it's the same exact thing. And more people care about baseball than hockey, in my opinion. It's not by a ton, but I think that Big Ten land, you think about the teams in the Big Ten, where they're located. I think that matters. The Big Ten dominates hockey. They just do. The SEC doesn't necessarily. They don't care about it, and it's warm all the time. It's different. There's a lot of different other things that factor into it, in my opinion. I won't get into all of it, but I think there's a reason why Big Ten is a very good conference in hockey. And for baseball, they're just not. And football and how the teams play, the Big 12, throw it all over the field. Pac-12, throw it all over the field. Look at the weather. That's part of it. Big Ten, you can't throw it all over the field necessarily once, it gets down to November and December and eventually January if you're playing then. So teams have to be built differently. The athletes, top hockey athletes are not going to go to Alabama. They're going to go to Wisconsin. They're going to go to Michigan State. They're going to go to Ohio State. So it's just interesting.
Minnesota Duluth.
Yeah. You don't even have to go to the Big Ten. You can go to Minnesota Duluth. But so it's interesting to me, the different sports, which conferences somewhat dominate those sports or are just really good at those sports. I think a lot of it is location, honestly, with the Big Ten dominating hockey and just where they are located in this country. I think that's a part of it. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon.
No, it's a great point, youngster, and I'm going to jump in here because you talk about location, and if you talk about going north of the border to Canada, a ton of hockey players. Do they really want to go even to the middle of the country?
Right.
You know, if they have the opportunity to just hop over the border and go to Wisconsin, which honestly the Canadian border to Madison, Wisconsin, it's literally a hop, skip, and a jump. I mean, yeah, maybe 12 hours. But it doesn't seem like a hop, skip, and a jump. But it really is, and it's. I don't even think it's that long to get there from Madison. I never made the drive, but my point is, a lot of hockey players in Canada, and so you look at a Minnesota Duluth, University of Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio State, the teams in the Northeast. Those are the teams that have right there in their backyard a great recruiting group to go to. Go right up to Canada. And to pull somebody to go to the Northeast or the Midwest for hockey, why would they rather go there, or would they rather go, a little bit more south down to, I don't even know which teams have hockey across the country, because hockey does not have as many participants. One is it's expensive. It's expensive to have a hockey program. I mean, you got to have rink, you got to have all the pads, you got to have all the equipment, you got to have the travel, all of those things. So, you're going to get domination in hockey from the Midwest and Northeast, a little bit out west, the Dakotas. I know North Dakota, they have a heck of a hockey team. So, your point there, I wanted to jump in because the recruiting basis, too, you talk about football, Florida, a hotbed. Well, of course, you've got the SEC land right down there. That's the hotbed for football, or west, California. But when you're talking hockey, you're talking Canada. There's good players in the United States, don't get me wrong, a lot of good players in the United States. But in Canada, we talk about people here, if you're from Green Bay, they joke about it that you're born with a football in your hand. Well, in Canada, you're born with a hockey puck. There's a hockey puck in your crib. That's what they do in Canada. They play hockey. And so that's why you're looking at a lot of these programs from the Midwest, Northeast, that have dominant teams because they can get the best talent. It's wonderful. But I don't have anything else on the Frozen Four, Kevin. It's amazing. You get 3 teams from the Big Ten, but they can't come away with the championship. But I'll tell you what, still get a good run to get 3 teams that represent the conference into the Frozen Four. That's awesome. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about Notre Dame as a school. You mentioned Notre Dame affiliated with the Big Ten for hockey. And we're going to talk about something that came up at one time, but I haven't heard anybody talk about this in a while. We're going to talk about this at the end of the show. Notre Dame football. Hockey's already in. Is that opening the door to eventually see Notre Dame in the Big Ten? We're going to talk about that later, so you got to stay tuned, folks. Turning it back over to spring practice, though, Kevin, this is a good time for some of those kids that didn't get a lot of playing time last year or starting quarterback battles. Coaches can get out, work with the kids again. I liked spring practice when I was a college coach. I could get a lot accomplished. Some people don't like it. I liked it as a coach. As a player, I hated it. I'll tell you that. I hated spring practice as a player. I was going out, I got to get outside again, but it was like, you know what? We're not playing again until next fall. So why am I out here? When I was my first year when I redshirted, went into that spring practice, that was actually, to me, my most competitive time because I had something to prove. I redshirted as a freshman, so I had to go out and show the coaches that I was going to be ready in the fall. So that, to me, probably was the most competitive, and I was a young kid. I was 18. I knew better than spring practice. I got to go play as hard as I can. As I got older, I don't want to say I was lazy, I still went on and participated, but it was like going through the motions, if that makes any sense to you, as I became an upperclassman. I had my spot on the roster, had my spot in the lineup, blah, blah, blah. I went out, I conditioned, got some touches on the ball, did some things. But to me, it really wasn't a chance for me to really improve on much. The short amount of time we had with soccer and the few weeks that we practiced, I wasn't getting better in that short amount of time. So I did. I went out, I gave 100%, and I conditioned. I got started on conditioning to make it easier when we were done. But at that point, I wasn't learning anything more that I could for the fall. But I think the young kids, it's very beneficial. Like I said, my first spring practice ever, to me, I went out and I busted my hump because I had something to prove. I had to show the coaches I'm going to be ready to play in the fall. So that's how I'm going to leave that part. I know you want to ask me another question when you're done talking about spring practice, but I wanted to give you a little insight to me as a coach and me as a player. As a coach, I loved it because I could work with the kids. As a player, I could have cared less.
Yeah, no, understandable. I've heard this from a number of NFL players that have recently retired, guys like, and I don't remember if it's exactly Tony Gonzalez or not. He's just one example that I'm throwing out there. But I've heard guys like Tony Gonzalez, and again, not using him as a concrete example because I don't remember if he's one of the guys I heard it from or not, but he knew when he retired playing football, he knew that he could play 16 games, play a couple playoff games. He knew he could do that. And he said that was fun. And it's like, okay, then, why'd you stop? Part of it is because you just want to preserve your body and you know that it's dangerous and you've played this game, tackle football for, say, 20 years. By the time you retire, say you're 37, 36, 35, you start playing tackle football at even 15, let's say. You're playing tackle football for 20 years. Everyone knows about the head stuff now. So it's like, okay, how much longer do you want to play? And it starts hurting when, you're trying to walk. And, yes, you can play physically, realistically, the games. But what I've heard from NFL players recently retired is that I don't want to do OTAs. I don't want to be that veteran leader to lead young guys and be to every single team meeting or 15 minutes early and take all the notes, and because I know my role. I know every single route I have to run, every single pass protection I have to remember. If you're an offensive lineman, I just don't want to go through all the crap. I know I can play 16 games and have a bye week in there and get subbed once in a while, and it's like I know I can do that, but to go through all the practices and all the meetings and all the extra garbage, all the flights, it's just not worth it after 15 years in the league, which I completely understand. And it's the same thing with spring practice, in my opinion. If you're a junior middle linebacker who's been a starting middle linebacker for 2 years, it's like, why am I out here? Do I have to give 100%, like you said, Troy, in the amount of time that you're actually doing these spring practices, 2-3 weeks, and then you have your little spring game, and it's like, all right, see you in the fall. I mean, yes, it's not like that exactly, but kind of. You're not playing games. You're not necessarily practicing to get, that much better at your position in these little spring practices that you have for, 2 hours. I mean, they're regulated by the NCAA, how long you can practice each week. I believe it is that they set the hours to for these teams. So there's only so much you can do. If you're an established starter that knows basically everything, you need some, fresh tuning on every single play, every single call, every single scenario. Sure. But do you really give 110%, at that point? The answer is no. It's the same thing with NFL players retiring, maybe earlier than they technically can in terms of playing performance, but the interest just isn't there for all the crap, so to say. Not to say that spring practices are crap, but for established leaders that know they're not going to get, any better in a 2-week span, doing some walkthroughs, hitting some dummies, I get it. I fully get it. So I'll leave this question, I guess, with you, Troy. For me, as an Ohio State fan, and I want to talk about I want to barely briefly go over the 3 teams that had spring practices so far on Saturday, April 7th. There were only 3 of them, to my knowledge, in the Big Ten that did have spring games. So I'll mention those, for a couple minutes. before we move on to Notre Dame talk, basically to close the show. But for me as an Ohio State fan, I care about the spring game to a sense that I'll watch it. And if I know I'm not going to watch it live, I'll record it. And, for the most part, and I don't even know if this is every school, but for Michigan State, I had to cover Michigan State for Land of 10. And that spring game, and it's 40 minutes, it's not 60. They're not 15-minute quarters. The coaches can screw around with the time and, screw around with the score and how points are held. So you can't care about it too much, but it's a quick 40-minute thing in terms of the actual game taking place. So, take it with a grain of salt for what you see for some of these spring games. But in general, I'm interested because it's spring football and it's the only football, action that you're going to see for your team until August, for some teams September. So it catches my eye. I like to get to know some of the newer names, how they look. But it's not something I'm following every single day. And the spring game, again, I'll record it, I'll watch it, but it's not a huge priority of mine to watch Ohio State spring game. Again, will I record it? Will I watch it? Sure. But honestly, it could be in the background for me as a big Ohio State fan because I just know it's the spring game. It only means so much, really. We're months away from the season starting. It's not even like 2 weeks before the season. Like the NBA games or spring training in baseball, this is literally months away from the season starting. So you can only take so much from it, but I'm curious for you, Troy, being a Wisconsin fan, how much do you care about, watching the Wisconsin spring game? What do you take from it? Do you take anything from it? Do you even watch it?
Never watched one in my life.
There you go.
Never watched one in my life.
Yeah.
So I will give you this perspective, though. I do like it, and I mentioned it as a coach, especially in the NCAA now where you can have early enrollment, where you can have kids enroll for the spring semester, and then they can get a start, and then they can attend spring practice if they're eligible through the clearinghouse. So, again, I think there's some value to it. As a fan, I don't care. I just hope nobody gets hurt. No ACL injuries, no shoulder injuries, no major injuries. That's always a big concern that you have when you have spring practice. And the old adage is, Kevin, if you're cautious, that's when the injuries are going to happen. So you got to be careful. You don't want your star running back tearing up his ACL in spring practice. And we've heard of cases where players have done it, and it doesn't have to be in contact. It can be from planting. Those things happen. So there's always a risk. But my value that I see for a lot of these schools is if they have early enrollees that came in the winter or spring semester, it allows them to get on the field, be part of the team before fall. That is something to me that I think is very valuable. The other valuable piece is for those teams that are looking for their starting quarterback for the fall. You can implement some things. You can start the quarterback competition already in the spring. Granted, again, it's a short amount of time, but you can get these guys in that mode, like, okay, here we go. But then I'll switch it back over. As a coach, do you know how hard it is, Kevin, to motivate upperclassmen in spring? Do you know how hard it is?
No, I'm sure it's pretty hard.
I remember as a coach, I literally had to sit down with these guys and say, look, I understand. I've been there, been a player. I understand. But I need you to be role models right now for these younger kids. So whether or not you want to be here, I need you to be on that field, and I need you to go through everything. And I would literally tell them, I need you to go through the motions like you want to be there for these young kids that needed that practice time. I think I had told you, Kevin, maybe it was you or another show. People think that in Division III, when I coached Division III, that there's not this big deal on recruiting. The thing is, I had to go out and get students for the university. So I had players that I recruited that redshirted, that were just not on the roster, that wanted to play. So the spring was almost, I don't want to say it was an open practice, But in the spring, I also had the opportunity, if there was other athletes on campus that wanted to participate in soccer and try out in the fall, they were able to come out in the spring. So that, to me, was very valuable. And so I know it doesn't happen a lot in Division I football and Big Ten that we're talking about. But you got to remember, spring practice occurs, doesn't matter if you're Division I, II, or III. They all get it. They all get that practice time. So this is a thing. I know this is a Big Ten show, but I had to go down that road as a coach that I thought it was very valuable. But it's very hard for upperclassmen to see the value in going out in spring. You know, they don't want to get hurt. So then I had to keep preaching to them, look, if you go 50%, you're at more risk to get hurt than if you go 100%. So you might as well go 100%. And then, of course, you got some of those upperclassmen, Kevin, that want to prove a point to the young guys, and they're maybe over-physical in the spring, if that makes any sense to you. They're like, hey, this is my team. Get out of here, young boy. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but they're trying to prove a point. Like, look, you got to go through me if you want my spot, or you want a spot on this team. So yeah. I like spring practice as a coach. I hated it as a player. As a fan, I could care less. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and I completely get it, because there is only so much to take from it, and if I took nothing from it other than knowing that Ohio State is as healthy as they were going into the spring game, I'd be 100% happy with that, if that's all I knew going into August, realistically. But that's all I have. Our last topic, Troy, and cut me off if there's anything else you want to add. But Notre Dame and football and the Big Ten, like you mentioned, Notre Dame joined Big Ten hockey for this season, starting this past season. And Notre Dame, Big Ten football. We were talking before the show. There were rumors of that a while ago. And I had to pull up a couple articles because I know the ACC and Notre Dame have a little agreement. And I was curious to find out exactly when that was. That was in 2017, before the 2017 season. So before last season happened. Notre Dame, ACC football, Notre Dame is contractually obligated to play at least, and I think it's at least, 5 ACC schools from 2026 through 2037. I don't know what exactly that means from like now until 2025, I guess. But so through 2037, Notre Dame's got this thing with the ACC. And so like you said, Troy, before, Notre Dame ACC or Big Ten football doesn't make sense because you're seeing Notre Dame hockey go to the Big Ten. So why not Notre Dame football go to the Big Ten? It makes sense from a schedule standpoint, at least knowing that you'll have all those games with, you know, somewhat quality opponents. Not to say that every opponent in the Big Ten every single year is going to be a perfectly, you know, challenging game for you, but you're not going to look at it as, oh my God, they played this team. You know, they're not even a D1 school. You know, they barely just got a football team 2 years ago. There's no teams like that in the Big Ten. So Notre Dame, again, ACC, contractually obligated to play 5 ACC teams.
Is that part of an agreement, youngster, because of basketball?
It might be. It doesn't say in this article that I'm seeing, but I also see that NBC, Notre Dame football deal through 2025. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that every single Notre Dame home game or NBC is getting Notre Dame football through 2025. So, like Big Ten Network, I mean, I don't know exactly how it works for Notre Dame. I just know they're locked in with NBC for a while, and they're locked in to play 5 ACC schools through 2037, that sounds like. And there's something in the contract, too, that says Notre Dame football, if they were to give up their independence, it's something in the contract, if I'm reading this right, that says that they would basically have to join the ACC. if they decided to join a conference. So to me, it sounds like that's how it's put. It is contractually obligated to join the ACC if it does decide to give up its independence. That's a line in the article.
And I'm really wondering if that has to align with basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. That's the other major sport in there, and they play in the ACC for basketball.
Correct.
So you wonder if that contract and that agreement that they set up with the 5 schools. Now, is that 5 schools per year?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I looked up Notre Dame's schedule for this coming year, and I see Wake Forest is 1, Virginia Tech's 2, Pitt is 3, Florida State 4, Syracuse 5. They also play USC, they play Northwestern, they play Navy, they play Stanford, they play Vanderbilt, they play Ball State, and they play Michigan. So they're playing, 2 Big Ten teams this year?
They always play Michigan. That's a great game. I love that game. It doesn't matter how crappy either of them are. That Notre Dame-Michigan game is awesome.
Yep. So Notre Dame's football schedule is basically always loaded. And they have no real need, I think, and it doesn't sound like they care about joining a conference full-time.
Well, here's the thing, Kevin. Why would they when they got NBC in their back pocket?
Exactly.
I mean, you think about that. So you join a conference, I would imagine that NBC contract, if they join a conference, is null and void because you're not an independent anymore. Right. Now you're going to have to schedule your conference games. That's why I might have.
I think we might have lost Troy there. But Notre Dame football, like we were saying, and Troy, I'm sure, is going to call back in and finish his point. But Notre Dame football, Big Ten, to me, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be a thing, at least until 2038. And Notre Dame Big Ten or Notre Dame ACC football doesn't sound like it's going to be a full-time thing until at least 2038. Like Troy was saying, if you've got NBC in your back pocket to televise all your games and it's a fairly major network, you don't want to have games, have to go through the Big Ten network or the ACC network for that matter. Not to, crush the Big Ten, but it's not NBC. If every single Big Ten game was on ESPN or ABC or Fox, even Fox Sports 1, that'd be one thing. But to compete against NBC televising all of your games, it's just like, well, there's not much beating that. So Notre Dame, to me, football-wise, not going anywhere, not joining a conference, at least until 2038. And I think that's a smart thing because, again, it's about television, realistically. I think, honestly, to parallel it to the NBA, there's a reason why Kobe Bryant made as much as he did his final season with the Los Angeles Lakers, because of television. Television rights. And the LA Lakers TV network paying the Lakers as much as they did is basically saying, we don't want you to tank. And if you do tank with Kobe, that's fine, but you better have Kobe so that people want to turn on the game. Whether it's game number 1, game number 82 of the regular season, or game number 51, or game number 26, game number 31. Point being, you have to have some attraction if you're the Lakers. And so Lakers rebuilding, you have Kobe, TV networks happy because their ratings stay up because there's Kobe there. And especially if it's his last season, then you're definitely getting eyeballs for Kobe's last game against Dallas, for Kobe's last game against the Kings, for Kobe's last home game, for Kobe's last, game whatever. So there's a reason why, in my opinion, the Lakers paid Kobe $20+ million his final season to stay there. Because the Miami Heat knew with Dwayne Wade, it's like, you're not worth this money, and we don't, essentially, they made the decision, the Heat did with their television contract, it's not worth it to keep Dwayne Wade for a ton of money. The Lakers did. And so if you're Notre Dame and you're getting all this money by NBC, I've talked about this in other shows too that Troy and I do weekly, that television ratings are huge. That's where the bulk of the money comes from. It's not you and I buying a beer at the game, even buying the seats, because there are other people that will buy the seats. But as long as there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers for a Brewers baseball game, then that team is going to make money. And that leads to higher payrolls, and that leads to coaches making $10 million a year, and that leads to media people complaining about it, or general fans complaining about it. The money, to me, a bulk of it comes from TV stuff, and if Notre Dame's got this deal with NBC for the long term, I find it hard for the Big Ten, ACC, any conference to really compete with that, and I think it's smart for Notre Dame. I heard Troy cling back in to this podcast, but it's smart for me to Notre Dame to stay the way they are. Guarantee yourself 5 ACC games or Big Ten games or whatever. Right now it's the ACC until 2037. But you've got NBC in your back pocket.
I might not be around in 2037, youngster.
Of course you will.
I might not be around to see the end of that. That's a long way away. I don't know where I dropped out. The wonderful world of technology, because I was still rambling, and then all of a sudden it was just like, nobody's talking. Nobody's talking anymore. But I'm gonna put a kibosh on this. Notre Dame football going to the Big Ten logistically made huge sense.
Yeah.
When the rumors were out there. I mean, right there, Notre Dame logistically for the Big Ten would have been perfect. But when you look at it, as far as Notre Dame and their NBC contract and all of that stuff, if I'm Notre Dame football, and I didn't catch everything you said, if I'm Notre Dame football, I'm being a cash cow for the school. That's what I'm going to be. When 2025 comes up, just go to NBC. We're not joining any conference. We want another deal. We've got to play these games against the ACC. But again, I said it. I think it has a lot to do with the basketball agreement. Hey, we'll let you in, but you got to play our football schools.
Right.
Because that helps them, especially if it's on NBC.
Oh, yeah.
If it's North Carolina going to Notre Dame, when is North Carolina football going to get that kind of coverage? So I think the ACC, when that came up, that had to be part of that agreement. Again, don't quote me on that, folks. I don't know. If you're listening to this show and you know for a fact that that's what it is, find us on Twitter at TroyRobert967. The youngster is at KidCunny, KIDCUNI, or our show handle at YoungsterOldMan, all one word. Let us know if you're 100% sure about these 5 games, because I'm not. But I think it has a lot to do with basketball. I'll say this, Kevin, and I haven't wavered from it. When those rumors were coming out, when Notre Dame was kind of shopping around, doing some things, I didn't want Notre Dame in the Big Ten. I did not want them in the Big Ten. Everybody else did. Not everybody, but a lot of people did. I didn't want them in the Big Ten. One is, I don't think Notre Dame football is the Notre Dame football that I grew up with. And again, I'm a lot older than you. When I was growing up and somebody said, we're playing Notre Dame, that was like, man, they're great. They always had great teams. Now, to me, Notre Dame makes some pushes for a top 10, but they're not a national powerhouse anymore. They're just not. And I'm not afraid of Notre Dame coming to the Big Ten, so on. I heard that argument, you don't want them there because then they'll beat your Badgers. They might beat my Badgers. A lot of teams might beat my Badgers. That's part of it. My thing with that is you look at the conference and what's going on. So you bring Notre Dame in, and you got to bring other teams in, like the whole Rutgers thing and the Maryland's and all those things when that happened. But you can't right now where the Big Ten is, Kevin. Do you really want to start adding more teams? I mean, where you're at now, because you can't add just one. You got to add 2.
Yeah.
You have to make it parallel. So who are you going to add? If you want Notre Dame in the Big Ten, who are you adding? Where are you pulling another team from? Would it be Pitt? Would it be West Virginia? I mean,
would it be Wisconsin Whitewater, Troy?
Hey, I'll tell you what. A few years ago, I think Whitewater could have played with a lot of D1 schools. Good plug for our school there, youngster. For those that don't listen in all the time, or even those that do, we don't share this a lot. Kevin and I went to the same college, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, Division III powerhouse. I know last year, Kevin, well, it's kind of funny. Coach leaves, and I call him Coach because I had him on my show. You worked with him a number of times. Went to Buffalo. What was it? Three championships in a row, something like that.
Yeah, 3 and 4, or 4 and 5, or 7 of the last 9 championship games they've been in. It's just ridiculous. I know the last couple of years since he left Buffalo, Coach Leipold for Buffalo football, making the jump from D3 to D1 in the MAC. It's not even some terrible D1 conference.
No, that was a good. You can't fault him for making that move. That was awesome for him. I was so happy for him.
No, since he made that move, though, they've taken a little step back. They haven't been, constantly making the title game or winning it. But during my time there, Troy, my first, I think it was 3 years, they didn't lose a game. They might have lost one of the title games, I think my third year. I think during my tenure there, they lost 3 football games in total, and I spent 5 years there. So they were a powerhouse, and it took them 3 years to even lose a game during my tenure there.
Then the thing is, youngster, when I was there back in the late 80s, early 90s, they weren't as dominant as they were when you were there. They were still darn good.
Yeah.
Football's always been good at Whitewater. And it's one of those things, you joked about it, but I'll tell you what, those teams under Coach Leopold, I think they could have played with some D1 schools. No, they're not gonna helmet it up against Ohio State. I'm not going that far. But you look at some of these Division I programs, I bet you they could have played with Rutgers, Kevin. I bet you they could have. Some of those teams. Physically they might have been outmatched a little bit, but I'm going to tell you what. Those guys played good football. No, they always seem to be Whitewater versus Union. Now we got off topic, so now we're going to go back. But Notre Dame going to the Big Ten, I don't want it. I don't want it ever to happen. I really don't. And part of the reason is I look at it, 2 reasons. One is you got to add somebody else. Who else you add? And that's how we got started on this Whitewater thing. Who else are you adding? Because you look at it now, you've got some programs already in the Big Ten that struggle. Rutgers, Maryland football, they have their opportunities at times, but not a dominant program. Indiana football, that's more a basketball school. So you can say that maybe half the conference is really competitive, and then you've got guys at the bottom. So you add Notre Dame, which would be a competitive school, but I just don't – who else do you add? Because when you're starting to go south, you got Nebraska, kind of southwest to Nebraska. You got Iowa. Would you add an Iowa State? I mean, I don't
That's
think
an
people
option.
real.
Because I know, like Oklahoma, Texas have thought about the SEC and stuff, making that jump. Does Texas make its whole, conference at that point? There's been talks of if Oklahoma leaves, and it's just basically Texas schools at that point. For the most part, do they just make it a Texas thing? And so, like Iowa State, what would they do? It makes sense with Iowa for sure. Iowa State is certainly more north than any other Big 12 program. So the Big 12, there's been talks about them, that conference going kaput if X, Y, and Z happens. So I don't think that's out of the question for Iowa State down the line, years down the line. If they join the Big 10, that's honestly probably the most likely one, in my opinion anyway.
Well, yeah, and Iowa State actually makes a lot more sense from that standpoint. They're actually, if you're in reference to Wisconsin, Iowa State's actually closer than Iowa. The whole Notre Dame thing, I'm just not for it. I'd never been for it. I just look at them and it's just another team. I like the Big Ten, and when it expanded to where it is now, I wasn't even real happy about it.
Right.
But that's the world of economics, right, Kevin? It's all about the bottom dollar. It's all about making the conference money. But where it's at now, I mean, even look at Big Ten basketball. And what is it, 13 teams? 14.
Yeah, 14.
14 teams in a conference. You got 2 divisions. I mean, at some point, you've got to turn the faucet off. Like, hey, there's nothing else coming in here. We're locking the door. But the way that the world of economics goes, Kevin, and I know this was a couple of years ago, people talking about super power conferences, like with 18, 20 teams in it.
Yeah.
Is that where it's going to go? I mean, that's not for this show for us to talk about, but eventually I guess it could go that way. It's almost like making mini leagues, right? You get like little four little divisions in your conference, 4 divisions of 5.
Right.
But I mean, I'd have to see it. I'm going to start getting all worked up, and I told you I didn't want to get worked up today.
Yeah.
So I'm done. Too, I'm done babbling.
Yeah. I think that's the issue with basketball. We even saw it during Nebraska's season. It's like, oh my God, Nebraska 13-5. How in the world can you not put that team in the tournament, NCAA tournament? It's like, what could they play? And that's with 14 schools in there. That's with 35, regular season games, so to say. At least 30 every single year for every single team. So football, I mean, if you've got 20 teams in your conference, how in the world do you make that work from a scheduling perspective? Michigan's not playing Ohio State every single year. At that point, you'd have, 18 other schools that Michigan has to play? I guess you schedule 9 conference games every year, and you play this set of 9 one year and then this set of 9 another year. It's crazy if you were to do that. So even as it is now, with Big Ten football, you're still not playing everyone. The schedules aren't great in terms of fairness. And that's
just ask Wisconsin last year.
Yeah.
Again, you don't apologize for the schedule, but man, they got a pass last year, not having to play all the top teams.
Right.
I mean, and I'm a Badger fan, and that's why I said, and I'll go back and reiterate my point. When they moved Big Ten from 10 teams, I was upset. Kevin, I am an old-fashioned guy. Not that I don't like change, but if you look at it now, where did the conference get better by expanding?
Right.
Where did it get better, Kevin, as far as a competitive standpoint goes? Who are your dominant football teams? Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State. Weren't they already in the conference? The only thing that expansion did for the conference is it gave them more money. That's what it did. It's all economics. That's why I don't like it. Because if you look at the teams that are dominating in football, it's still the old-fashioned Big Ten schools. So I'm done. I'm done because you will get me going now about these economics with these schools. Every school, even the University of Wisconsin, they're greedy. They're all greedy, Kevin. All of them are only worried about winning games and making money. Yeah. And I'll even go down that road. And then people can get on me and bash me for it if you want. Find me on Twitter, TroyRobert967. I don't think any of these big-time schools really care about the student-athlete the way that you think they do. At the end of the day, the Big Ten and every university in the Big Ten, Kevin, it's about the financial benefit that they're getting. That's all I'm going to say. I could keep going as to why I believe that, but then you and I would be on this show for another 2 hours. But I'm just going to leave it at that. You can add anything quickly if you want. Other than that, if you got another topic, I am done. Yeah.
No, I'm done too. My only thing I wanted to mention, since we brought up Wisconsin Whitewater and these little schools creating, becoming D1 programs, I was a sports editor at Whitewater School Paper during my time there, and a common question from fans and myself was, why is this school, because this school is a really good basketball program, men's, women's, that's going to actually, potentially can make money for you, and football, this team's on ESPNU every single year, basically. So why is this not a D1 school? And the answer was, part of it is, it ultimately, of course, comes down to money. And if you don't have the money to hand out X amount of scholarships for all these different sports, becoming D1, D3 has no scholarships that you give out, and kids get money for that, and there's none of that. D2, I know it's a little different. I believe you get a set amount, and you have partial scholarships. At least when I talk to the AD.
I'll jump in there because I coached D for a little bit. Yeah. You get allotted X amount of scholarships, but for example, men's soccer, I had 5 scholarships, Kevin.
Right.
I could divvy that up any way that I felt fit. So it was 5 full scholarships. So you take that 5 full scholarships, multiply it by the tuition rate, and that's how much money I had to spend on scholarships. So if I wanted to give a kid $4,000, I could give a kid $4,000. So that's the way that, at least when I was coaching, and it's been a little bit, so it could have changed since then. But at the end of the day, I was limited to 5 full scholarships. And so I could do a half, I could do a quarter, blah, blah, whatever it was, X amount of dollars. And the other thing that you run into, switching conferences, because I helped a team go from university go D3 to D2. You have Title IX. So now you have to have the same opportunities for women, which I totally agree with. But, for example, in men's soccer, we had 5 scholarships. The women had 9 because of the allotment and the opportunity for women to play sports at that university allowed them to have 4 more scholarships. Mm-hmm. So, again, now we're getting into a lot deeper conversation at this point, but that's one of the things you got to look at, too. Your point to Wisconsin Whitewater going D1. Okay, so now football would go D1. How many people are on that roster? How many scholarships does the NCAA allow? Because now you have to take a look at your women's programs and find out how many scholarships can I give to all the women, because it has to match. It has to fall within a Title IX guideline. And a lot of times you'll see women's sports may actually get more scholarships at football schools, and other programs are limited, which would have been my men's soccer program. And again, I had no problem with it. But that's the reason, because people would ask, oh, you only have 5. Yeah, I only have 5. The women have 9 because we have football. And because there's more scholarships available in football for men, the women have to have the number that meets the Title IX guideline. So that's a quick overview of my Division II experience there with the scholarships, Kevin.
Yeah, and that was, eons ago in terms of time, like Troy said. But even when I talked to an AD or 2 about it, I don't even remember if I talked to multiple, but at least 1, that's basically how it was you have, a handful of scholarships. You can make some of them part-time. Like you said, Troy, you have a certain amount of money at the end of the day, realistically, to give to these kids. And so that's what it comes down to, is the money. The other big thing other than scholarships, I'm working that out. In terms of that side of money for Wisconsin Whitewater and other schools to make that jump is facilities, like Whitewater's basketball arena. I think that net D1 standards, but like football might not have, or like the tennis courts even, and this is, not even talking about basketball, football, but tennis courts at Whitewater would have had to have been upgraded. The wrestling facility would have had to have been upgraded. The pool for swimming and diving and, other sports, they all have to be upgraded. And for D3 universities that only have so much money, they don't have Ohio State money. They don't have Michigan money. They don't have Wisconsin money. So ultimately it comes down to money in terms of that. But, that ties into Notre Dame, why they're sitting where they are as an independent. They're part-time ACC basically. But it comes down to money, and NBC gives them the most money, and that's how they make the most money. So they're sticking with NBC. They're sticking with being an independent. They're sticking with being able to play Michigan every year and Northwestern here and there and USC basically every single year. Notre Dame's in a fantastic spot in terms of its football team because you can do whatever you want scheduling-wise outside of having to play, 5, major conference teams every year. So Notre Dame's sitting pretty football-wise. I don't think they're moving anytime soon, at least until 2037, it seems like. So yeah, that's my final point on it. I've got no other topics to bring up for this week's show, but follow us on Twitter at youngsteroldman if you want us to talk more about Big Ten baseball, if you want us to talk about more about Big Ten softball. Like I said before in this show, didn't bring up wrestling, but Penn State, won a national title. This was a few weeks ago now, but they won, I forgot what it is now, but something like, 5 titles in 7 years. Penn State wrestling is ridiculously dominant, that nobody, really talks enough about. And there was some other wrestling stuff too. But if you have any topics that you listeners, like I said, I know there's thousands of you out there. If you have any topics for us, at youngsteroldman on Twitter, that's all one word. That's our show handle. That's where we post all our links to all the shows that we do, not just Go Big or Go Home. If you got topics for us, if you want to yell at Troy for whatever, if you want to yell at me or call me great, feel free at youngsteroldman. And again, we've got our own Twitter handles, at Kid Cunny for me, at TroyRobert967 for Troy. But that's all I got. Show us what you want to talk about. Let us know. Type away. Talk to us. However you want to do it. Follow us at youngsteroldman. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Otherwise, we'll talk about what we think you guys want to hear about up until basically football season begins. And we'll certainly sprinkle in, big stories as they happen. But covering big topics, covering baseball a little bit more, that's kind of the plan going forward. But there are certain weeks where we'll just stay on a big topic and say, hey, nothing major happened. Let's talk about Notre Dame Big Ten football for an hour, almost what we did today. So, again, find us on Twitter if you want us to talk about stuff that you think we're missing out on or that we should be.
You're so eloquent, youngster. You're just very eloquent closing the show.
Thank you.
I had to bring it in. I had to bring the word eloquent in. But as Kevin said, we're done. We're kaput. We're out of here. Big Ten, whatever you want to talk about. Again, find us on Twitter at youngsteroldman, all one word. At Kid Cunny is the amazing, eloquent youngster.
I want to mention this, Troy. I want to mention this, too. I forgot to talk about Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue spring games. We'll bring that up next week when, let me just look down the line right now. Indiana plays this coming Saturday, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, Ohio State, Rutgers, Wisconsin on Friday, actually, April 13th. Wisconsin spring games on a Friday. Not that you care, Troy. But
we'll care less.
Yeah, we'll cover some spring game stuff next week.
Well, I'll say this from the bottom of my heart. I hope that every athlete that is participating in these spring games gets done with the game healthy. I don't want us to get on this show next week and start talking about, Indiana's quarterback, major knee injury, or, Rutgers running back tears up ACL. I want every player to go out, participate, do well, and come out healthy. Because there's nothing more heartbreaking than a college athlete getting injured, let alone in the season, but then spring practice. So I hope all of these spring games, I hope that when we come back on the show, we're not reporting about major injuries that could cost a kid the 2018 football season. So I hope everybody has a safe spring game. I highly doubt anybody that plays in the Big Ten listens, but if you do, find us on Twitter. We'd love to have you on the show. So with that said, Kevin, I think we should let these guys go. I think we're done. We're over. We're kaput. We'll join everybody next week, so make sure you find us. Anything else, youngster?
Nope, that's it. Talking spring football next week.
Yeah, we're done. We're done. We're out of here.
Yep, done. See ya.